Good day. Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2020. Welcome to today's event, CMMC is Here, brought to you by GMS Registrar. I'm Vaughn Marino, Director of GovConnects and GovConnects Foundation. Today's feature presenter is Jeff Dalton, CMMC Board Member and Chair of Accreditation and Credentialing Committee of the Board of Directors. During the presentation, please mute your microphones. At the end of Jeff's presentation, Anjali Kotha from GMS Registrar will conduct a brief Q&A session. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation using the chat function. Please set the chat function to Anjali Kotha. Welcome, Jeff Dalton. Jeff, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen so we can look at some slides. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Dalton. I'll be presenting some information to you in today's webinar. And I want to first of all say thank you very much to Anjali and the whole crew at GMS for hosting me today. I've known them for many years and worked in other industries with them, and I really appreciate them bringing me on for today's discussion. So today I'm going to talk about two things: a little bit about the CMMC and where we are in the current process, and I'll also be talking about the credentialing and accreditation framework, so everyone has a good idea of where we are going with that. We do a lot of webinars around the CMMC AV. I think I've done about 50 this year. And of course, those of you that know me know that I do a lot of webinars anyway. And I've been involved in the CMMI and Agile industries and communities for many years, where I perform as an assessor, an appraiser, an instructor, consultant, teacher, coach, and lots of other stuff. So I got a lot of hobbies and a lot of things that I enjoy doing. So I try to bring all of those things to the table. And when I talk to y'all and when I take your questions. Let me just give you a little bit of background. You all know about the CMMC now, but it wasn't always with us. It's only been with us now really officially since January of 2020. We saw some early releases, some pre-releases. I remember the 0.04 release was very different from the 1.0 release. So they had a real production development project going on over at the SCI, where they put this model together. But if you look back to 2016, there was, of course, requirement to self-attest with NIST 800-171, and some contracts had requirements for ISO 27001. There are so many numbers I get jumbled up in my head. And the industry, the DoD, decided that they needed something a little more consistent that was led by an outside assessment organization, and needed to really dig in on cybersecurity. If you've seen any of the webinars that Katie Arrington does, and she's just a wonderful spokesman for CMMC and all things cyber in the DoD, she talks a lot about the F-35 and China and how information was taken from us, and millions and billions of dollars of value taken from various adversaries and players around the world every year. And we really need to get more serious about cybersecurity, especially starting with defense. And sometimes people say to me, is the CMMC going to stop all breaches and all cybersecurity intrusions? And the answer is nothing can stop all intrusions. And to me, the great thing about a model like CMMC is that it gets us all thinking about it in a structured and logical way. Lots of different models are out there. Now the CMMC is going to be the standard, at least in the Department of Defense and probably beyond that. And it's a way for us all to get on the same page, using the same language, taking the same approach. So when we say level 3, we know what we mean. When we say level 1, we know what that means. And we'll have a standard assessment method. So it's a way for us to improve the performance of cybersecurity throughout the whole defense industrial base. And that's a really good thing. It doesn't have to solve every single problem. It has to get us all on the same page so we can solve problems. Remember, models and technology never solve problems on their own. It's people that make problems go away. And getting us all on the same page is really important. So the CMMC program kicked off in
So
2019.
hopes up for that. That's all I had.
And we have some other people talking on this webinar. I'm not sure what that's about, but maybe we have a Google bomber or a Zoom bomber, maybe. I don't know. Speaking of cybersecurity, I don't think that's what it was. Early 2019, we had announcements the CMMC was coming out, and there was a process that we went through to create an accreditation body. And of course, what came out of that was the CMMC AB, or the CMMC accreditation body, founded in the fall of last year. And I was lucky enough to be asked to join that board in January of 2020 in the role of credentialing and leading the credentialing process, and taking some of my experience in the CMMI and Agile CXO world, standing up credentialing and chairing their partner advisory board, and really getting involved in that part of the business for about the last 15 or 16 years, bringing some of that to the table and helping to put together the accreditation body and their approach. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about that. So our plan is to very methodically and very in a structured way release the ecosystem, which includes assessors and training and certifications and audits and adjudication and remediation and lots of different components that I'll be telling you about in today's talk, and methodically roll it out over the next 5 years. And it's important that we know when we're looking at CMMC and what it's about, that this is unprecedented in the history of the certification business. No one has ever said, within a short period of time, you need to assess, certify, and maintain over 350,000 organizations. And that number seems large, but when you consider that many, or at least a percentage of those organizations, are going to have multiple assessment requirements. So if you look at a large defense contractor like a Lockheed or a Raytheon or a Rockwell and there's so many great companies, it's impossible to do a single assessment for a company that has 70 or 80 or 90,000 employees spread out all over the world, many different networks, many different connection points, many different databases and data sets, many different product design and development or PDM systems that house the information that we're trying to protect, what they call controlled unclassified information, or CUI. And so that number could potentially be much higher. And we're already seeing other government agencies showing interest in this. So this infrastructure, this ecosystem, is the size of it is unprecedented. So literally every decision we make on the accreditation body is focused around scale. How can we scale this up? And I know yesterday we were talking about how many thousands of transactions per second we could process in the assessment systems we're building and looking at. So it's a little bit challenging in terms of scope and size. But we've been working hard on it, and we've got a really good start going. So let me show you a couple more things. Just to sort of review with everybody, the CMMC is a maturity model, meaning that it has various levels, and the higher levels are higher performing than the lower levels. And I should stress that maturity models are really about what we verify. It's entirely possible that a company that's been verified to be level 1 is performing at level 5. We just didn't verify it at level 5. And the verification process, which is going to be done by assessment, is going to be largely driven by contractual requirements. And my experience in the CMMI tells me that, companies choose maturity levels judiciously. They do it based on contractual requirements. They do it based on their ability to appoint resources to work on it. So people shouldn't go away from an assessment with the perception that a company that's assessed at level 1 is a lower performer than one assessed at level 2. It's entirely possible that they are, but all the level indicator tells us is what the assessor looked at and what was validated. So maturity models are interesting in that way, in that they're not audit models. We're not saying, yes, no, you're this. We're saying, you know, you're at this stage, we verified this stage of performance, and here's some recommendations for improving that performance. And it's a way to measure and get on a common plane. One of the things I really like about CMMC is the same thing I like about CMMI, is it gets us all talking about it, gets the community involved. And if you've been on LinkedIn or Twitter lately and you hashtag CMMC, you'll see there's a lot of conversation going on. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are making suggestions and ideas, and some people even making complaints. And that's to be expected, of course, in an industry like this. But there's 5 levels of performance in the CMMC. And unlike an audit model, and like CMMI, there are what I call credibility analysis that gets done at each level, and that has to do with how ingrained, or what we call persistent and habitual behavior, how ingrained that is in their culture. And so there's practices in the various levels that address, you know, is this something that you just put in place the minute I walked in the door, or is this something that is part of your ongoing culture, which is indicative of long-term success? So maturity levels are kind of cool that way, and CMMC being written, at least in part, by the folks at the SEI who authored the CMMI, you'll probably notice some similarities between them. There are some different things and different words if you're used to those models. We still use the term practices and the term processes, and they have the word capabilities in there. They use the term domains to separate out all the different functional areas, how things get organized. And there's 17 of these domains. And you can think of these as best practices, or like I like to say, you know, questions. So in my CMMI work, I talk about turning each practice into a question and saying, you know, how do we do this and why are we doing this? And that helps really, again, talk about things, get the discussion going, get on the same page about the meaning of all these things. Because we know without doubt that the number one cause for system failure, whether that's a people system or a technology system or a cyber security system, is understanding the requirements, understanding the meaning of the requirements. About 70% of projects fail because of a misunderstanding of the real meaning of the requirements. And it's no different here. You know, having the opportunity to talk about these things and flesh out what our meaning is. And the meaning is going to be somewhat different from context to context. So in a software company, you're going to see differences than what you might see in a hardware engineering company or a missile defense company or a space, you know, vehicle company, whatever your context is, you're going to have some different interpretations and meanings of practices. And that's just the way these models work. So having this infrastructure, this framework from which to talk about these things together and create a community around the meaning of cybersecurity and all the practices within is really powerful, and will actually help reduce that root cause of all the of many of the systems failures anyway, by getting us all on the same page. So it's actually really cool stuff. I'm starting to get as excited about this as I get about CMMI. This, you know, if you've seen any other models in the industry, the 5 maturity levels, and, you know, basic cybersecurity is level 1, what they're calling basic cyber hygiene. Level 2, we're starting to see more practices included, but we're also seeing documentation requirements. So level 1 is similar to level 1 in other models. It's a little bit ad hoc. You're doing things that need to be done, but, you know, maybe there's no structure around it. When you get to level 2, we're looking at some documentation, some definition of what the meaning of these things are, and practices about how we're going to do these things. In level 3, we're looking at the next level. So properly planned, resources maintained and followed. And there's, a lot of different things in there. Level 4 and 5, we're starting to get to that continuous improvement mode. So you can see as you move up in the levels, not only do the practices themselves, there's more of them, they grow in scope, but we start to see that the requirement for institutionalization or persistence and habit, they call it sometimes, how that comes into play, and that the assessors are going to need to assess those things. So the 17 domains, level 1 has the fewest and level 5 has the most, and it's an inclusive model. So a company that decides they want a level 5 assessment is going to have to do all the domains at once. And a company that decides they want to do a level 1 assessment is just going to have 17 practices and a few domains. So it's a cumulative model. I got a few domain slides here, but I don't think we need to go through each one of them. I just want to show you an example. I'm not going to take you through the model. There's 181 practices. I'm not going to take you through the model, but I am going to just show you an example to give you an idea of how it's organized so you can get a feel for it. This is just one practice area called access control, or one domain, sorry, they call it. Confirm access granted to organizational systems and information as appropriate for identified access requirements. So just for example, you can see that the practices are listed. There's a level 1 and level 2 practice. And in the model anyway, they're listed by capability, which is, you can think of this as kind of a segmentation around a specific area of functionality. So, when you look at the model, it is, depending on where you look, it isn't always sequential. So in this particular capability, which is established systems access requirements, and again, none of this is important for you to follow the model. Don't use this as your guide. This is just an example. You can see that each one is numbered and each one has a practice associated with it under each of these capabilities. And each one has a reference in the model document itself, kind of explaining what it means. And as you move up into the higher levels, you're starting to see more rigorous controls and more complex controls being introduced. So the entire model is organized this way. Again, don't use these slides as your guide. These are just exemplary of what is in the way the model is organized. So let's get into the ecosystem a little bit, because I know that a lot of you have been following the CMMC for a while, and maybe you knew some of those things already. There's a lot of components to our ecosystem. And the trigger for having an assessment conducted is when an organization has a contractual requirement. And honestly, a lot of companies are asking to be assessed right now. And I'm getting many requests from companies saying, hey, we want to volunteer. We want to be, one of the first companies that appears on the list. And so they're going to request certification. They're going to contact the AB, the accreditation body, and say, I want to request a certification. In the future, they'll contact a third-party organization called a C3PAO, a CMMC third-party assessment organization. But organization implements the practices and processes, so they make sure, so they'll do some sort of self-assessment, hopefully, and be ready for an assessment. And I was talking to our good friends at the DoD the other day about this, and we were saying that a self-assessment is an indicator of higher maturity. So a company that understands that what is about to occur, that they're going to be externally assessed for their cybersecurity profile and maturity. A mature company will say, well, we're not sure where we are in all these practices, and they'll go through a self-assessment, and they'll get organized to ensure that they're going to succeed. And if they're not going to succeed, they'll work on those things. So that first and second box there are kind of circular. They may go back and forth a little bit, but at some point, that organization is going to select a C3PAO, a CMMC third-party assessment organization, and with that will be an assessor. So there'll be a certified assessor that is part of that organization. So they'll assign the assessor, they'll perform that actual assessment, which is going to be an on-site event while they're on. Did I say outside? I'm thinking coronavirus when I say that. An on-site event to assess and look at evidence for all of the various practices. So they'll literally have conversations with people at the company that make sense. They'll look at systems and observe or examine controls, and they'll look at documentary evidence if that's a requirement for the level. And once that's done, they submit it they do a QA check, and then they submit it to the AB, and then assuming the check goes through okay and the assessment was performed as prescribed in our assessment methodology, and they've taken all the steps and dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and gotten sign off on everything, and they've closed everything out, the organization, assuming they succeeded, will receive that maturity level certification. In the case where they had practices that maybe didn't meet the required level, there's a remediation process. So they'll get a certain amount of time to correct those issues. And again, remediation it's a little bit of a tricky thing because some things can be fixed in the, can't remember the exact number, I think it's 90 days. Some things can be addressed in 90 days and some things can't. So it's just a question of where they are. And then there's also an adjudication process, and we're still working through the details of that, but the adjudication process is when the assessor and the organization are not in agreement on the results of the assessment. So for example, if an organization being assessed says that, we don't agree with you, that we think we're good on that practice, we need a way to evaluate, the efficacy of that claim. And sometimes we expect, sometimes the claim will be correct, and sometimes it will be, people being disappointed they didn't pass. And just my experience in the assessment business is that we'll probably see a little bit of both of that, especially early on in the process. So that's basically the basic ecosystem. But let me get into some of the specifics about how this is all going to get delivered. So as chair of the accreditation body, credentialing committee, it was my responsibility and my committee's responsibility to put together the framework that's scalable to deliver this sort of operation. And I should say and call out the working groups that helped work on this. We had 2 working groups working, really tremendous amount of work that went into building this ecosystem around the certified professionals and the accredited organizations. And we had people from, the cyber world. We had people from the certification world, ISO auditors, ISO CMMI appraisers, people that were experts in many different fields to bring to the table, not a cyber process as much as a credentialing process. And so we had just a fantastic group of people to help pull this together along with the committee. And we came up with the following roles. So for people, we're using the term credentialed. So if you are a credentialed individual credentialed by the accreditation body, you will earn a certification. And there's basically primarily 6 different certifications. And we have some caveats in here, but let me go over the happy path first. The certified professional, the CP, this is a gateway certification, meaning that everyone goes through this process. So if you want to be an assessor or an instructor, or you want to be a QA auditor for the AB, you will first become a certified professional, a CP. And the reason for this, and we've had a lot of people say to us, well, why should I have to do that? I've been a CISO, I've been a CISSP. And the answer is those things are great. And many of our applicants have that and should have that in their background. But this isn't about that. This is about the model and the requirements of the model. And the model, remember, is made up of multiple standards and has some practices in it, but it's also about the maturity aspects of the model too. So there's a lot of new information in there that we want to share with you. So everyone becomes a CP. And then once you're a CP, which is a 3-day class and an exam, you can go a couple of different paths. You can go back to your company and be a certified professional and kind of be your local expert on CMMC. You can go be a consultant as a certified professional, helping companies prepare for assessments, and you can participate on assessment teams. So that's going to be a requirement that you must be a certified professional or a registered practitioner, and I'll talk about that in a second, but that is a requirement to be on an assessment team. The assessor role, that's what most people are talking about right now. There'll actually be 3 different kinds of assessors. This is another class, 3 or 4 days. Same answer to the people that are, asking why they can't automatically be an assessor is we're teaching you about the assessment methodology. And this isn't a model where we're going to be able to just go out and wing it. We're going to have a very specific set of practices and a very specific set of deliverables and techniques that we're going to ask you to execute so that all the assessments have a similar look and feel to them and we can compare results effectively. So there's an assessor 1, an assessor 3, and an assessor 5, and that has to do with which level of assessment you're authorized to conduct. After that, we have the certified instructor, the CI. And the way the instructors are going to work is interesting. There is a training committee that worked on this, but the instructors have to be assessors before they're instructors. And we really wanted that. And that's not a requirement in other models, but I think we've learned our lesson in other models that if we're going to be teaching a lot of people who want to be assessors, that we want that teacher to have at least some experience as an assessor themselves. And so certified instructors are going to work for third-party training organizations called licensed training providers, and I'll talk about them in a second. We also have the certified master instructor, who is at this point in time an AB employee that teaches all the other teachers. So this is kind of like a master teacher, if you will. And that'll be an AB team member. I'm an acting certified master instructor right now. That's only because we don't have any certified master instructors, and we're working hard to make that happen. And then we have the certified quality auditor, and this is a combined role of an assessor and a QA auditor who's going to work for the AB, conduct adjudication assessments, review assessment results, and basically be the AB's experts on the ground as to the quality of delivery of the certification, the certified assessor community. So those are the credentialed professionals. We also have one of the really common conversations around the accreditation body is do we do this first or this first? Because each one is dependent on the other, and we call it the chicken and egg problem. And we have many of these. We have many chicken and egg problems to solve, not just a few. And one of them was, if we don't have the training and examination process out, and our partners with the DoD would like to see us get moving quickly, how do we do that? How do we get assessors in the field before we have a formal training program, formal testing, and just a kind of a lockdown process? And the answer to that is provisional assessor. And a provisional assessor is a temporary role that's going to go from, well, actually we have some picked right now, and then it'll be good up until a certain amount of time after when the formal program comes out next year. So we're anticipating that formal training will be up and running with formal examinations sometime in Q1 calendar year, Q1 2021. And until then, we've selected about 60 to 70 provisional assessors who applied for that role. And these are people that have a very high level of cyber or assessment experience, assessing against maturity models or against standards, and also have experience with cyber. And we went through a special application interview process. Even with that, I think we got something like 459 people applied for the provisional role, even with the increased requirement for experience. And then we did a random selection of those. And then we ensured that those that were randomly selected actually met that requirement. And in some cases, we did multiple random selections because we had to come up with, there were some people in that initial list that didn't meet that requirement. So that's provisional. And the provisional assessors are going to help us fine tune the program. They're going to help us give us feedback, tell us what they found, tell us how the model's working, tell us how the method is working, and they're going to provide us with a lot of information. We hope. That's our plan anyway. Okay, so those are the credentialed individuals with the idea that provisional assessors are provisionally credentialed. So they will have to go through the formal training and formal examination process when that comes up. Of course, the class will be a little simpler for them because they've been doing it. But to be fair to everybody in the community, we will have everybody go through the same process. We also have another role that is not credentialed, and we call this the registered professional. And the registered professional is someone in the community that wants to work closely with the AB, wants to be part of our community and our ecosystem, wants to deliver CMMC services and AB, I guess, authorized services, if you will, and not leading to certification, but independent consulting type services, and be registered on our marketplace. So I guess I don't want to misspeak on this. We don't really have AB authorized services, but they will be listed on our marketplace as being people that took training with us, have a common set understanding of the meaning of the model and how to deliver those services. They are not certified by us, however. They are just registered on our marketplace. They can also serve on assessment teams. So at this point, both registered practitioners, well, at this point, only registered practitioners can serve on assessment teams because we're going to have these folks out very soon. I'm getting a lot of calls on when we're going to be announcing this, and we're getting very close. So our priority was provisional assessors, and we've done that. We've announced it. We're doing the classes. Next is going to be registered practitioners, C3PAOs, and RPOs, which I'll talk about in a second. On the organizational side, we have 4 accredited organizations. So the first one, and the one that everybody is talking about, is the CMMC third-party assessment organization. A lot of people think the C in C3PAO stands for certified, but they're not certified. They're accredited by us, and they're licensed. So they're accredited with a license, and they're licensed to represent that they market, sell, and manage the assessment process and have responsibility for QA of the assessor and the assessments that they do. So it's CMMC third-party assessment organization. And we're going through those right now, and we're going to be announcing that pretty soon too. So things are going to come out pretty fast and furious over the next couple of weeks. We also have licensed training providers. These are like C3PAOs in that they are authorized to market and sell products or services, I guess, if you will, that are part of our ecosystem. But in this case, they're trainers. So this could be anything from a university. As a matter of fact, we have some colleges that have already signed up, some community colleges actually. And these are companies that specialize in training. So you're seeing a lot of the big training names signing up for this. Because remember, we're talking thousands of people need to be trained in a fairly short period of time. Right now, we're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 assessors in the next 2 years. And also not including all the people that want to be CAs and RPs and those types of things, or CPs, I'm sorry. So many acronyms in this place. Then we have the licensed partner publisher. And these are organizations that are developing training materials. And this is really a cool idea from our training committee. Ben Chubinay runs a very successful, or has experience running a very successful training company for many years. And he brainstormed this idea, and it was really cool that people learn differently, and people learn from different techniques and different styles. You know, I'm a very visual learner. I learn from looking at pictures, and if the picture is done right, I get it right away. I'm like, okay, totally get it. Next slide. Some people, you know, when I teach my classes, if I use pictures like that, some people come back and say, no, I don't see a description of this. They want to see the text. Some people want to learn through virtual reality type tools, classes on Second Life or something like that. Some people learn by video and audio. So the cool thing about the licensed partner publisher is that it's going to give different organizations the chance to strut their stuff and show how they can create training. So the idea here is that we provide them with the learning objectives, and we provide them with the examinations, and we say, go build a class. And then they license that material to the licensed training providers. So this is a very scalable, distributed way. And again, going back to the 350,000, could be way more companies. How do you scale that? So sometimes I've heard, like on LinkedIn, well, why aren't you guys just running all the classes? You need to control it. And I was like, well, think about the scale of it. That would be impossible. And so the best way to do it is distribute the load across many companies or many organizations. Some of them are companies, some of them are, there's even, I think, some government agencies in there that are wanting to do it. So it's a really cool idea that Ben and his team came up with in his working group. And then finally, there's the organization seeking certification, or you might think of this as the assessed organization. These are the DIB organizations, defense industrial based contractors, that are seeking to be assessed. And right now, there's a few different categories. Of course, there's the primes. When contracts start coming out, after probably early 2021 calendar year, they're going to be higher maturity levels, 3, 4, and 5, maybe even in some cases. And some of them are performing at that level already. And then there's the subs and the partners, of which there could be dozens or hundreds even, and they would be lower maturity levels depending on whether they are responsible for protecting CUI or not. And then that would indicate a lower maturity level. So if they're not responsible for handling CUI, then level 1 and 2 would be more appropriate potentially. And then we have companies that are asking to be certified, and that's a completely different market. They're the ones that are saying, maybe I don't handle CUI, but I really want to be assessed at level 3. Or maybe I do, but I'm not on one of these contracts and I want to be assessed early. So we're having those kind of requests as well. So those are the accredited organizations. And just like we have a registered practitioner, we also have a registered provider organization, an RPO. And you could think of both of those registered roles as, consulting firms or contractor firms that help companies prepare for CMMC and do cybersecurity consulting potentially, or assessment consulting. And they employ or contract with registered practitioners to deliver services. And this is a really cool offering because it's for a company, maybe a small company, maybe a large company, but any organization that delivers consulting services that wants to be aligned with the ecosystem and have a logo and participate in whatever events we might have and receive training and really market themselves as being CMMC ecosystem ready, so to speak. It's a fantastic opportunity. And they're not C3PAOs. In other words, they're not delivering assessments. So they're not as the requirement in terms of the kind of things they have to earn in terms of certifications and audits and things like that is much lower for them because they're not doing assessments and they're not looking at that information and they're not interacting that closely. So an RPO is a great opportunity for an organization that, maybe wants to deliver preparation services, consulting services, do webinars, really get a name for yourself in the market in that space. Great opportunity, and for your employees too, to be RPOs. Okay, a couple of next steps for you. I promised Anjali I would be right on 40 minutes, and I've got 1 minute to go. We're going to train the provisional assessors. We got about 75 on the list. And by the way, the list is a great list of people, but the other 420 were great too. I mean, there was nobody on the list that I saw that wasn't just terrific. And we did a random selection. That was the agreement we came to with our partners at the DoD and others. And the ones that got in, great. It's great to have you, and it's going to be exciting to be in the first class. But the ones that didn't get in it, this is just a pilot period. We're just getting started. We're just trying to pilot things, kind of walk before we run. it isn't that long a time before the formal program will be up and running, just, early next year. So what you're looking at 3 or 4 months, and 4 months probably. And, in the meantime, we see every possibility that we may need more. We don't know that for sure, but we keep talking about, well, what if a lot of companies start asking about getting assessments done? Maybe we'll add another class or two. So there's nothing to preclude us from that, assuming there's enough for you to work on, enough for you to do. So don't get discouraged if you were not on that list. You're still in the list, and you still are in the queue for being certified professional and certified associate training come when the formal program comes out. Next, we'll be accepting and processing the licensing of C3PAOs. And we'll be prioritizing the ones that are on the selected provisional assessor list, the people that are associated with C3PAOs. We'll be processing and accepting the RPOs in the next couple of weeks, and the RPs as well. So those first 4 things are like going to come out fast and furiously. And I know there's been a lot of pent up demand, a lot of people saying, when's it going to come? When's it going to come? Well, it's going to come at you pretty quick now over the next couple of weeks, because we are at the point now where we got the framework figured out, and we're getting all this stuff, fired up. Come the formal program, we'll train the certified professionals, to train the certified assessors. And by then we'll be in full operational mode, which we're hoping will be, during the first quarter of 2021. So that's my 40-minute overview of the CMMC, the AB, the credentials, pretty much everything I know about the CMMC and what's going on with it. So I am available to take whatever questions you might have now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I would like to give you a virtual round of applause. So we we couldn't do the clapping, right, with Zoom, the hand raising or the clapping, but I always enjoy hearing you speak. And we have quite a few questions that came in through the chat. And I will answer the questions based on when they came into the chat. So one of the first questions was, can the participants receive a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
I'll need to clear that with my friends at the AB, but probably yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. And then the second question, so will CMMC certifications be required to bid on contracts and or be listed as a sub on the contract bid?
Well, eventually, yes. In the DoD space anyway, eventually my understanding anyway, is that all contracts will eventually have a CMMC requirement in them, but not until rule change occurs at the end of the year, and until the DoD puts those policies in writing and starts putting them into RFIs and RFPs. And the way I understand how it's going to work is they're going to pick about 10 RFIs to embed that requirement in and see how that goes. And then once that's done and we get feedback from all of that, they'll start putting it in all requests for proposal.
Okay. All right. Very good. When is the CMMC marketplace anticipated to have companies authorized to perform certification prep services?
That's a great question. So we're really focused on processing the applications and getting people notified. And those of you that were notified about the provisional assessor acceptance, you know what that's about. We have to run through and look at everybody. We have to make sure everybody's a U.S. citizen. We have to do a background check. We have to go through a process to figure all this out. And right now, our focus is on getting those people their authorizations and licensing, because frankly, they paid money for this, and we need to get this out, and they've been waiting long enough. So we're going to focus on that first. But once we get through that process, we'll have the marketplace up.
Okay. All right, very good. Is there an advantage to winning a contract if you're at a higher level?
Well, I can only speculate, because I don't think there's a hard answer to that question. But I think that the DoD will be dictating the level requirement for
Mhm.
contract. So they'll say, in order to bid on this, you need to be CMMC level 3 or 4, or whatever it's going to be. I don't know. I mean, just based on my experience in the CMMI arena, I haven't noticed that people with higher maturity levels have an advantage, but I'm only speculating.
Okay. All right. What will the obligation, if any, for the 1099 consultants working outside of a contract, i.e. RFP, RFI, etc.?
Is the question about organizations being assessed, or is about organizations conducting assessments? Do you know?
Unclear. So that if that person wants to resubmit their question in the chat box, I can ask that. So let's go on to the next question. So will the SBIR program require a CMMC certification?
I don't know the answer to that. They haven't announced that.
Okay. All right. How are non-DoD facing systems being evaluated? For example, timekeeping systems or HR systems?
Yeah, right now, my understanding, and this, I have not seen a policy on this, but I've heard Katie Arrington say this in a webcast, is that COTS products are out of scope. Now, if you're working with a cloud service provider, an MSP or something like that, then they are in scope, in that they need to demonstrate that they have the proper controls in place to manage your data. But computer off the shelf products are, at least as far as I know, out of scope for the time being.
All right, and here's a question. So will Microsoft 365 accounts need to use GCC high tenant to satisfy level 4 or 5? Their cryptic answer is yes, though level 3 would be capable of doing it within our own controls to satisfy the practices without.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with a question of that specificity around the technology, so I'm going to pass on that one.
Okay. All right. How does the company get How does the company get CMMC certified, and how do you determine the level needed based upon your company and the products and services that we sell to the DoD?
Sure. So, like I think I mentioned, there's basically two paths currently to go through the process. One is that you have a contract that you'd like to bid on, or an RFP you'd like to bid on, that has a specific certification level requirement. Like it'll say, in order to bid on this, you must be level 3. So then there'll be a flow down there, right? Because let's say you're a sub to, I don't know, Rockwell,
Mm-hmm.
and you're delivering services to them. Well, the contract will either say, your subs need to be this, or it'll say, all of your subs need to have some level of CMMC. And then what will drive it is whether you handle CUI or not. So if you handle CUI, level 3 is going to be a requirement. If you don't handle CUI, then level 1 or 2 may be a requirement. And most people are saying this level 1. They're thinking of level 2 as just kind of a building block, not really a level people aspire to be. That's what I've heard anyway. So it's going to be about CUI and whether you handle it or not. And the primes are going to drive that. Now, the second path is that you voluntarily want to get your company CMMC certified. And again, it's the same test. If you do handle or plan or want the ability to handle CUI, then level 3 is the minimum. If you don't, then level 1 is typically where you would go. And for both of those, you would contact a CMMC third-party assessment organization, and you would, just like you do with ISO or ITIL or CMMI, negotiate a contract with them and go through the assessment process.
Okay. Great. Are you still accepting any more companies for the assessor role? Where can they apply, and what are your requirements?
Sure. There's open registration on the CMMC AB page. If you're talking about becoming an RPO, then there is a citizenship, or I don't want to quote this exactly because I always get this wrong, but it's either a U.S. citizen or U.S. person, and I would have to double check on the site. But if you go to CMMC AB, all that information is there. If you're going to be a C3PAO, it's a little bit, the bar's a little bit higher on that because you will be handling CUI, and you will have a higher expectation of security. So that is a U.S. citizen only owned role for now. There's a Dun and Bradstreet check that checks, the background of your company. There's an interview process you go through. And in order to actually deliver assessments, depending on level, there's requirements about getting CMMC certified yourself and getting ISO 17020 certified. So you can apply, but there's multiple steps to get through the licensing process.
Great. If not already addressed, which it wasn't, so when are civilian and federal agencies such as the DVA expected to adopt or use CMMC?
Yeah, we're focusing on the DoD right now, and so is the DoD. There have been other agencies that have put out. I think I mentioned earlier the GAO put something out that said, we'd really like you to have CMMC, and then something came out today or yesterday, and I can't remember the agency off the top of my head, but it basically said, even though you can't get certified, we would like you to adopt CMMC and demonstrate that you're doing so. So we're already seeing other agencies showing interest. But our primary focus is on the DoD. Now, if you take the CMMI experience, which also started with the DoD, right, and was a DoD initiative, it didn't take long for Health and Human Services and GAO and different departments, DHS now, to adopt CMMI, and then it was a short jump to industry adopting it. So it wouldn't surprise me if other agencies adopt it fairly quickly, and then if industry adopt it fairly quickly. That wouldn't shock me. But right now we're focused on the DoD's success and getting this off the ground for them.
Okay. Back to the one question about it was a 1099 consultant. I believe the question is asking, and this could be a clarification if CMMC is meant for the organization or for an individual. It's for an organization, but they were mentioning if the organization has a 1099, what role would they have in the CMMC certification? I believe that's what they're asking.
So I think it's like other process model assessments or audits, that if you're a 1099 and you're acting as a team member of a particular part of the organization, it's just that you are getting your paycheck somewhere else, or maybe having it sent directly to your own company, you're obliged to follow and fall under the same compliance rules that the rest of the team is. So if the rest of the team is subject to various cybersecurity controls, you would be subject to them. So the company would have to, when you do an assessment, in CMMI, we have that supplier agreement management practice area that, a lot of companies seem, overly desperate to keep out of scope for some reason. And you know the experience yourself because you're a lead appraiser.
Yeah.
And, that's a supplier agreement management issue, right? It's like if you have contractors and they're not complying with the controls and the practices, then they're a risk to you. They're a danger to you. And so they will definitely have to be in compliance as well. At least I don't see how they can't be.
Okay. All right. And so this person said, thank you, Jeff and Anjali. Do you foresee any issues regarding protests regarding CMMC level assigned to a certain contract and a vendor protesting?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that subject. I don't want to get too deep into it, but that wouldn't shock me.
Okay. And there was a follow-up that says, thinking they overshot the CMMC level to be safe. That was the remaining of that question.
And I do LinkedIn a lot. I'm sure you've seen it. And I try to avoid getting into confrontations with people, but people are very, emotional about CMMC because it's a big change. And I always say, well, based on my CMMI experience, which is, from an ecosystem standpoint, is an identical experience, right? The DoD came out with it. They put it in all the contracts. They had a set, everything was pretty much from an ecosystem, the same thing. And so I said, well, if CMMI was any goal, and some guy jumped in and goes, stop talking about CMMI. This is nothing like CMMI. I'm like, no, it's exactly like it. And that's exactly what happened is companies protested and companies, pushed back. But that all worked its way out. And you don't see that anymore because the community is, and I hate to say this and I don't really say this to people on LinkedIn because it inflames them, but it's like, the reason it doesn't happen anymore in the CMMI community is because they're a much more mature community than they used to be. Pretty much, gotten to the point where they say, okay, we know this is important and we know we need to do this. With CMMC, it's been really like almost a study in psychology 101. And I know you're a scientist too, so maybe you'll enjoy this. If you do the study, right, if you look at the data, the emotion levels are through the roof because this is new to them.
Yes.
And I don't know what it's called in the science business, but they've been self-attesting for some time that they're compliant, and they're about to have external assessors show up at their door and say, hey, we're just here to check on that self-attestment. What's going to happen, right? Is there's going to be a certain subset of the population whose self-attestment was, I don't know, sort of optimistic, let's call
liberal. Yeah.
And this just as well as I do from your CMMI, because you've done many, you're very accomplished at this. Sometimes and I find this more with smaller companies, I don't know what your experience is, but I find with kind of the smaller side of the company that their owners have a very optimistic view of their team's performance. We got this, we do all this, we do all this, we do this. Then you get in there and you're like, not really. And, I understand that as the owner of a company. I think my people are godlike,
Yeah, me too.
I can tell just from the early, going in this morning when we started, that you think really highly of your team just by the way you talk to them. And I'm the same way, but we're actually about to have a CMMI assessment in our company, and, the team's freaking out a little bit. and they're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And we're just doing a couple of practice areas. So it's a very different experience to have someone who doesn't know your company, who has never seen you before, doesn't get all the context and all the things you're proud of and all the work you've done, doesn't have any knowledge of that, come in and say, okay, I'm here to test you. And that's very unnerving and has got people, definitely has people awake.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 more questions so far. So how do you sign up for RP and RPO training or be on that list?
Sure, that's great question. You can sign up to be an RP and an RPO right now. So on the CMMCAB.org website. And we actually, we've been getting this question a lot. So we actually have the training now. So the problem was, as we were assembling the self-study training, which has voiceover and, automation and all this stuff in it. And we finally have it. And we are piloting it with our first provisional assessor training class over the weekend. So that people are going to take that. And then we're going to have the 3-day class after that. So once that's done and we got all the feedback from that and we've integrated it in, it's going to be released, and all the RPs are going to be notified, first that they're RPs, and second that the training is available to them.
Okay. All right, very good. And then since personnel clearance information is considered CUI, does that mean that all cleared defense contractors will effectively need at least level 3 certification, even if they are a non-possessing facilities just because they use JPass?
I don't know the answer to that question, not my sphere, but I will, if you'd like, there is a group in the AB that focuses on that, and I will ask them the answer to that. That's a very specific question. I don't want to dig a hole for myself on that one.
Okay. All right. And then the last question, just to round out the hour, and this may be too technical, but I'll ask. So you touched on this earlier, but are you able to elaborate on how certifications of MSPs, so such as Microsoft 365, Google G Suite, will occur? Specifically, do you anticipate that the MSPs will get certified themselves, allowing their customers to simply point to them and their certification, much like FedRAMP, or where individual companies need to go through each requirement and their respective level, pointing to each MSP's features and configurations and how they map to each requirement?
Right. I think it's going to be more the latter is our intention, so that we're not, at this point, we're not saying to Microsoft or to Amazon AWS, you need to be CMMC level 3, but there is a practice scoring system, and one of the scores is inherited, and inherited is when we say, okay, AWS provides us with this particular service, and here's how they're meeting this, and they're, FedRAMP High or whatever IO4 or whatever it is that they are rated at, and so that satisfies that requirement. So that's, I don't want to get too technical on it, but that's essentially, if we have an MSP that has a verifiable level of performance on that given control, then the score for the assessment will be inherited for that particular control.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I wanted to personally thank you for taking the time out of your day to come here and speak with us all. We had a lot of good questions, and it's such a great presentation. So thank you so much for helping us and talking with us today about CMMC. We're all excited.
Thank you, Anjali, and always great to see you and your team, and I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to working with you more on this.
Okay.
And Jeff, I'm going to say hello to you, sir. I'm clearly enjoying your background scene behind you. I wish I was there, but
Need to get you a Mai Tai and put you in a chair under that tree, Jag.
And some
And
contributors.
I thank you very much for your support, and we will support you 100%. And then I'm also preparing ourselves to be available to you for the need for certifying your C3PAOs for 17 or 21.
Well, thanks for having me, everybody, and I wish you all the best of luck, and we will see everybody on Zoom or Teams probably in a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Hi, what's the 1:15 session?
Yep. So right now we have a break till 1:15, and you can still stay on the line, or you can mute yourself or take a little coffee break, and we will start at 1:15 for our presentation of GMS Registrar Services. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Angela, it didn't, you couldn't hear me in the, through the computer, correct?
Can you hear me, Don?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
both
yeah,
of you.
I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you before.
I was just checking because I don't have any mic connect in my box on the computer.
I see that. You don't.
We can hear you, so we're good.
I was going to do that little trick I mentioned to you, Angela, to get bumped up to the top,
Yes. Uh-huh.
but I can't,
Yeah.
there's no audio switch for me now on the screen.
Uh-huh.
That's okay.
But we can hear you, which is just a good thing. Okay.
Jeff did a great job.
He did. So did Angela.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Going smoothly. I can see you.
I think it's about that time, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're 2 minutes late. It is, so I'll start now. Welcome back to the afternoon session. I'm Vaughn Marino. I would like to introduce Deputy Dasika from GMS Registrar, who will be introducing the rest of our speakers.
Thank you, Vaughn. Good afternoon. My name is Deepthi Dasika, and I'm the Program Manager at GMS Registrar. GMS Registrar is the world-class accredited certifying body providing third-party auditing and certification management services. We specialize in certification audits of various ISO standards under ISO 17021, CMMI appraisals, and are a GSA-approved 3PAO for FedRAMP inspections under ISO 17020. Presenting on behalf of GMS Registrar are Anjali Kota and Don Owens. Anjali has over 10 years of experience in engineering and management appraisal services. She is the Vice President of Technical Services of GMS Registrar and is the point of contact for FedRAMP program. She is responsible for GMS Registrar's corporate growth initiative comprising of strategy, business development, and customer maintenance. Anjali is a lead appraiser and lead instructor for CMMI development and services and a lead auditor for ISO 9001 and 27001. She is lead appraiser for CMMI Medical Device Discovery Appraisal Program. Prior to GMS Registrar, she worked at the Cleveland Clinic and developed various clinical software programs. Don Owens is the Director of Operations at BPX Technologies and founder and principal at Polymath Forensic and Risk Management Solutions, a CPA firm, which is included in the GMS group of companies. Don's 35-year career has been dedicated to assisting organizations to develop strategies and implement leading risk mitigation practices and controls. He works closely with boards and management to assist them in achieving their goals and objectives. Other services he provides include system and organization controls, reporting readiness reviews, and examinations, along with various other attest and risk management services. Without further ado, Don Owens.
Thanks, DP. Hello, everyone, and again, thank you for joining our webinar today. Just quickly, a quick disclaimer I have just to share on the screen is a lot of the views you'll hear today and or presentation comments are not to be considered to be of legal nature, audit, accounting advice or such. But however, the information you will be receiving is, I'm going to say, chock full of good guidance and insights into the services offered by both GMS and PFRM Solutions. During this presentation, like the previous session, if you have any questions, please look up Angelique Cota's box in the chat and submit any questions. Hopefully, we'll get to them at the end of this session. So quickly, for this part of the presentation, the first hour covered a lot regarding CMMC. And we thought we would expand this out and move from a federal government-focused supplier chain to more of a market-focused. And certainly, there are several groups in your client base. So just quickly, as presented in this slide deck, the federal government, which we spoke at length on. We also, many on this webinar, service state and local government. Also, individual consumers, not-for-profits, and then there's the private and public companies market. Certain of these groups apply to you, and a few may not, and or maybe a number of these groups are a future marketing target for your company. So I wanted to touch quickly on your clients and what drives their decisioning as to whether or not to use your products or services. Back, I'm going to say just 8-10 years ago, it was fairly cut and dry. There was a recognition that you had a need, or your client had a need or problem. And to address that problem, they would search in the market for products and services defined to their specifications that they expected to address their need or problem. In this process, I'm going to say fairly simple: define product service, define suppliers, investigate the quality of the service product, contract, receive product, evaluate it. If all is well, typically you had a long-term client in hand. But I'm going to say times have changed drastically, certainly evolving day to day. Leading practices now, your clients are concerned about your security, much like what we're describing in the CMMC world, CMMI world. I'm going to again expand this out to the general market, doing business with others outside of the federal government. Their concern is legality. Their concern is your reputational risk. Again, a few years back, and really prior to the full explosion of social media, your clients could do business with you and any other contractor or vendor, and they really had little concern as to, quote, the reputation risk held by the parties they were doing business with. This day and age, we're all connected. I mean, the whole supply chain is connected, and in many cases, viewed as, say, one body. So as you go through this process of dealing with your clients, they are looking at you and they want to know, how do you deal with matters of risk, matters of reputation, financial stability? How do you protect their data, intellectual property, if that's being shared? What's your network security? Again, always the matter of product, service, quality, and safety, and even your compliance with laws and regulations. A lot of compliance with laws, regulations, especially in the import-export area, it flows upstream to the user. So not only does the supplier or the producer have to identify what laws and regulations must be complied with, once that goes into your client's hands, they too are concerned. Now we've further, I'm going to say, blown up this population that it does flow downstream to subcontractors. So many of the subcontractors that you're doing business with in delivery of your product and services represent a risk to your clients. So I'm just going to say we live in a connected world. I did want to, even on a subcontractor standpoint, just one of the interesting, I'm going to say, examples that I've come across in the past few years was the shipping company, Hanjin. They were one of the top 10 shipping companies in the world. If you were relying on certain product and you were managing your logistics and you decided you didn't want to put all your eggs in one basket and ship through Hanjin, you wanted to use multiple shippers, what was quickly found out through the bankruptcy of Hanjin was the fact that you could go and contract with a shipper, but they in turn then subbed it to Hanjin, where you thought you had multiple supply chains for delivery of product. It didn't exist because those contracts with all these other multiple, I'm going to say from the client standpoint, direct suppliers actually had subbed it all over to Hanjin, and many companies were crippled by the fact that when Hanjin no longer could ship, what they thought was a diversified supply chain truly wasn't. So a lot of factors going into this day and age, how clients view you, the contractor, the vendors. So a little statement here: vendors, contractors, and other businesses and organizations engage professional service firms for assurance services, much like GMS and PFRM solutions, to increase the transparency, relevance, and value in the market in demonstrating to their clients, your clients, that you're proactive in identifying, monitoring, and managing risks. And as we move further into this, certainly these various assurance services, whether again, CMMC, CMMI, ISO, and other things that Angela is going to speak to directly, can certainly be a competitive differentiator with your customers. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angela.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. So today I will be speaking about the services that we offer. We offer the following assurance services, explicitly the third-party auditing of these services. So you see, we have a few of the ISO standards here. So your ISO 9000, which is typically a quality management system. And a quality management system is a formalized system of an organization's processes and policies and procedures and the responsibilities for achieving certain quality policies and objectives. We have ISO 20000, which is our IT service management, and there's some ITIL practices embedded in the 20000. So if any of you are ITIL certified, ISO 20000 is at the organizational level. ISO 27000, information security management systems. And a typical, if you're like any of our typical customer in the DC metro area, so if you're building product or services or running that service for the government, a typical pathway for an organization will be audited for your ISO 9000, which gives a really good overview of the organization's quality management system. And then as you grow a little bit more mature, you would do ISO 20000 or 27000. And that would be a package that's typical with our customers, the government contractors in the DC metro area, and probably the people who are attending today's events. If you are an organization that's more of a machine shop or recycling yard or plastics or paint factory, a typical pathway would be the ISO 9000, ISO 14000, which is environmental standards to ensure that you're not, polluting the ground and polluting the air, and then your ISO 45000, which is an employee occupational health and safety standard. ISO 45000 used to be ISO 18000, if any of you are familiar. It's a new change. They made some revisions to it, but is based off of the OSHA standards. Okay. And then CMI for Development and Services. I am a CMI for Development and Services lead appraiser. And if you are familiar, it's a process improvement and process performance improvement model. And government contractors, this is a requirement for when you're responding to different RFIs and RFPs. The current version of the CMI model is focused on process improvement. So you're identifying organizational goals and organizational objectives, and you're looking at your current processes at the organization and seeing, are those processes and those procedures and the ways that you're doing things at the organization, will they eventually satisfy those business objectives and goals? So you're looking at your performance objectives at the project level, seeing if what you're doing there by implementing those processes and procedures at the organization, will they eventually satisfy your business objectives? CMI FDA approved medical device discovery audit is a newer program offered through the CMMI. And it's a program for medical device stakeholders. So when we say medical device stakeholders, we're talking about FDA-approved medical device organizations that have FDA-approved devices, and it could be class 1, 2, or 3. And the purpose is for them to work together, CMI and those FDA medical cleared, medical approved medical devices, to increase different device quality and also thusly patient safety. So this is relatively new program, newish meaning in 2017 when we look at the scale of what's new. And this is medical device companies can go through a CMI appraisal of sorts to have certain a relaxation on some of their FDA annual audits and various surveillance audit. And then FedRAMP 3PAO. So we are a 3PAO organization. GMS Registrar is approved a 3PO, and you can find us in the marketplace, and we perform FedRAMP inspections. So FedRAMP is more related to the cloud and the transferring of information from the government contractor to the government using the cloud. So that's what FedRAMP is. And collectively, so some of our customers have all of these. They are doing various elements with the government in where they are, maybe they're running a call center, and there's different practices in ISO 27000 versus CMI for services, and they offer different various benefits. Your ISO standards look at the organization, much like CMMC, which we were talking about, that is an organizational wide standard. But then you go into CMI for development and services, and those two areas are focused at the various project levels, but that is rolled up to the organization. So that's some of the key distinctions between those areas. Next slide, Don, please. Okay, so why quality certifications and appraisal assurance services? So the main reason is quality, right? It can be cost effective. It's a magnitude shift in how effective and marketable your services and products are. So with CMI for development, maybe you're familiar, CMI for development started in the 80s, where there needed to be a standardized format of companies like Boeing and Lockheed building. So development, hardcore software development. Now CMI for development is not necessarily software development. So people on this line may say, well, we're not really developing software, but maybe we're developing a training capability for the VA, or a training capability for Indian Health Services or whatnot. That could be a CMI for development type of work. And then let's suppose then you're delivering that service of training, you're actually conducting the web-based training, you're actually conducting that training, that would be a CMI for services example. So it's not just software development now in the current version, more modern day versions of CMI for development. So why else do we care about quality? So you're competing with companies that have and promote the certification. So some of these names you may recognize. So Honeywell, 100% of their global software divisions are CMI maturity level 5 appraised. Much like CMMC, it is the maturity levels we heard earlier today, that there are levels, the maturity levels within each CMI for development and CMI for services. Maturity level 5 is your top most mature level in the CMMI model. Okay, likewise with the CMMC. Recent federal study indicates the use of CMI for development increases software development productivity by 34%. And that could be, is that in the design phase, in the testing phase, and that is because there are best practices in those CMI for development models that can help you increase that productivity in your development or your testing or your requirements gathering. CMI maturity level 5 adopters include Raytheon, Northrop, all of the big names on 267, or you see them in the technology beltway. Those are all the big names you see. They all have maturity level 4, maturity level 5. And these are the competitors, or these are the primes where you want to become a sub with, right? So even if you're a smaller organization, maybe you don't need a maturity level 5, but a maturity level 2 is a very good way to get into it if you're smaller, or if you have some sort of quality management system already in place. You can progress to a level 3 fairly easily. Level 4 and level 5 are those high maturity practice areas. Okay, Graham Industries using a blend of ISO, Agile, and CMI to enhance system and network security. That's another good point that I want to bring to you is with CMI explicitly, most people think it just is waterfall or some kind of spiral or hybrid, but you can, if you have an agile environment, CMI is applicable. It's no longer just the old waterfall methodology. CMI is diverse, and it can be applied to multiple diverse implementation of software development. Okay. Next slide. And this, if we were in person, all of you would get a copy of this, and you could take it home with you. But this is just an overview of what we offer in a picture format. So like I mentioned, we have various service offerings. We have our ISO track offerings, and you can see those there. It's a little small, but I'll read them out. So our ISO 9000, our QMS, ISO 20000, which is our information technology and service management, and and ISO 27000, which is information security management system. Okay, and then we have our CMI track, CMI for development, services, and acquisition, and the different various maturity models for the base models, which are level 2 and level 3, up to high maturity model. That's what we audit against, and then our FedRAMP track. Okay, all right, next slide. Okay, thank you. And I will answer that question during the Q&A session. So when we have that Q&A session, I will answer that question. So this is a GMS audit approach. When we look at this, we want to see this is in general an audit approach when auditing for ISO, CMI, or FedRAMP. The terms may be a little different. CMI, you may be like, hey, I've never went through a stage 1 or stage 2 audit. You could view that as the SCAMPI C or SCAMPI B, right? So this is just a general format readiness review, looking to see if documentation is there and you're prepared and there's roles and responsibilities and everything's set, the facility is set, the organization is set, ready to go through an audit. And there's various different stages, and those are the checkpoints to ensure that there's no large gaps. So there's no, we have an audit plan, we plan on going to take a shop tour, and the manufacturing is actually closed that day. You would kind of note, you would be aware of that during some of these earlier preparation phases. So when you're there on site, that doesn't come an issue. Audit management, corrective action. So that's definitely part of the ISO standard, is if during an audit, an ISO audit, and there is a non-compliance, so maybe it's a major or a minor non-compliance, we work as your certifying body, GMS registrar is an ISO certifying body, to identify those corrective actions and work with you to address the non-compliance and then close the corrective actions on our next audit. Registration, because we are a certifying body, we will certify you against those various standards. In ISO, CMI, we are a CMI business partner, and that means we conduct the audit, and then the CMI they do a final review, but we have the auditing responsibilities. Audit report, and then surveillance audit. So surveillance audits is interesting, because in ISO, surveillance audits have been there since the beginning of time. In CMI, there is with this new version 2.0, if any of you familiar, they do have a surveillance audit, and that is called now the sustainment audits. And there's certain increments of time when you can have your benchmark appraisal, so that first appraisal, and then you go into various different surveillance audits. So it wouldn't be every 3 years, it'd be 3 years and then 2 years, and these like mini or smaller audits. That's what we're calling surveillance audits for the purpose of this slide. But in CMI, it's called the sustainment audits, sustainment appraisals. Okay, and with this, and yes, so please keep on asking your questions, and we'll address that during the Q&A. And with this slide, I would like to bring back Don, and he will be talking about the PFRM offerings.
Thank you, Angeli. So briefly, for those of you, probably most of you, have not heard of PFRM Solutions, we're a fairly recent addition to the group of companies affiliated with GMS and others. So recently brought on board, and I'm excited to be, again, working with the team over at GMS. What's listed on here are particular services that PFRM Solutions is offering to the market. And before I step through this, I just want to revisit assurance services. So again, Angeli went through many of the quote assurance appraisals and audits that most are familiar with on this call. But when you look at the broader market, again, when we go into the, public, private company market, the general market, many times they're looking for different types of assurance. And many times that assurance is driven based on the demands of your audit firm. So the audit firm may go in and want to see validation of, how you're managing risks with your third-party relationships, or information being received from a third party that's incorporated into your financials. So you need to understand your market. You also need to consider what's your future target market. And again, if you're expanding outside of direct services and product to the federal government, these, as listed here, are many of the services that market is looking for. Just quick high flyover. We're going to go through, most of these, but the SOC support services is specific to audits of public companies related to the control environment that exists within those companies. So I'm not going to go into depth on that. Some of you might recognize COSO, COBIT, other matters that relate to implementing a framework for SOX compliance within public companies. So again, I'm just referencing it quickly now. And also network and data security matters. I'm not going to delve deep, as many of the matters that Angela just touched on correspond directly to the network and data security environments. So for PFRM solutions, I'm sort of grouping these quick as a quick summary: supply chain risk management, enterprise risk management, and the ISO 31000 standard. They all relate to frameworks in which you've established practices throughout your organization to manage risk. Supply chain is just one component of ERM in 31000. ERM crosses all silos, all business areas, all back offices of an organization, similar to ISO 31000. So just quickly, this is a very high-level snapshot of practices we consider when we go in and perform levels of risk assessment, risk management for companies. Number one is complete risk inventory. So if you don't know what risks reside within your organization, they need to be captured and inventoried. A next step would be, now that I know these risks, what is the potential implication, impact on my organization if one of these risks would be realized? Again, and identifying, threats, vulnerabilities, and what risk would result if that vulnerability was exposed. Taking this step further, you can create a risk assessment. A comprehensive living document that's maintained as your risk environments and risk factors change. I would get into risk factors. I'm going to say that some companies I work with, the way they catalog inventory risk, they may have a few hundred risks listed. Others apply a more broad category, and their risk inventories may run, I'm going to say, 30 to 50 specific risk factors. You have your risks. You recognize what type of impact they may have. How do you go about monitoring, measuring these risks? So, key risk indicators is, a good practice to have in place. The other critical component is, complete a controls inventory that serves to mitigate, manage the risks to, acceptable levels within the company. This evolves. This is not, I'm going to say, an overnight simple project, and it requires, top-down commitment and participation by boards, directors, executive management, senior management. Also, you need to assess these controls. You need to assess the design. Does the design of that control meet the intentions related to mitigating that risk? And also the assessment includes, is the control properly being executed? Is it effectively performed? Where you find there's issues, that's where gap remediation comes into. So on the far left, I mean, it's really, I'm going to say a capture, document, validate. So we could say you initiate, you collect evidence, you got to qualify the information received. Do you accept it? Concerns. You may have to go back, select additional information, additional artifacts, and ongoing monitoring, both the risk and the control environment. So again, just general summary, high flyover of SCRM, ERM, and 31,000 sort of consolidated into this brief slide. The next matters I want to get into are the SOC reporting. So SOC 1, SOC 2, and the other one's SOC 2 Plus, supply chain and cybersecurity. These are, I'm going to say, very in-demand assurance type examinations for the general market. I'm not sure how prevalent they are with respect to, federal government expectations, but certainly having these SOCs performed would be an element within your control environment demonstrating, you're effectively managing your risks. SOC 1, the SOC 1, and really the primary driver of a SOC 1 is, for those of you that are providing, direct services to your clients, it could be payroll, it could be certain consulting work, software design and development, you name it. The SOC 1 basically validates the monetary considerations being communicated and exchanged between your company as the service provider and your clients. Your clients want to know that when they're billed, that invoice is accurate. When they're charged fees, the fees are properly calculated and supported by the underlying services delivered. Some of you on this call may be payroll providers. So the fact that, you're cutting the payroll for various companies, those companies want to know that you're processing the payroll accurately. When you're requesting, transfer of funds, it aligns with the payroll itself and the obligations associated with it. They want the comfort that the financial implications of what you're doing to support their business are complete and accurate. In a SOC 1, first step is management's asserting. So you as management, you as the service provider contractor, say to your clients, we offer this service, we perform in a controlled environment, we have the checks and balances, segregation of duties, we have the proper IT security, cybersecurity in place, that when you receive information from us, it's accurate and reliable. So this is, again, more the financial communication and information, whether it's, financial transaction processing, like a back office processor, or, receiving payroll registers and funding those registers. This gives those clients comfort that what you're doing and reporting back to them, if they take that information and incorporate it into their financial statements are properly stated as it relates to the information you're providing to them. This is supported, as is all SOCs, by an audit report with an opinion, which basically is attesting to whether or not the management assertion, what they are, say, proclaiming to their clients, is accurate and reliable, and or if it's not, you could get a potential adverse audit opinion. One of the things with the SOC report that's unique, regardless of whether you're public or private, for the most part, it's sent to and or requested by your clients and your clients' auditors for validation purposes. So again, SOC 1 is more that financial information and reporting transfer between you and your client base. So SOC 2, now we're entering the a significant focus on IT back office operations. SOC 2 has 5 primary principles. The first one, security, also called common criteria. Security from the SOC 2 allows you to select which of these principles you want covered in your SOC report, except for security. Security is required to be reviewed, attested to, and audited to in any and all SOC 2 reports. So if your clients are concerned about your security, they're providing you, again, sensitive information, just the interaction and transmissions of monies and transfers and everything else. They want to know you have proper security in place. They'll say to you, I would like an auditor, an independent body to come in and perform a SOC 2 on the security within your environment. So again, it's, as stated, the information and systems is protected against unauthorized access. Secondly, they might say availability. I want not only to have, comfort on the security of your environment, but my information, the availability of the information and other materials that are being processed that I need to be able to access. So, availability, there's certain criteria to go in and test for the controls or criteria around ensuring that clients have availability to the appropriate information. Processing integrity, that kind of loops back to what I described earlier in SOC 1. So it wants to know that the system's processing complete, valid, accurate, and timely, and authorized transactions. Again, processing integrity is a, close alignment with the SOC 1 as it relates to financial information and reporting integrity. This just has more of a focus on the system itself, and I'm going to say the processing integrity of the system. The next 2, confidentiality. Again, information's going over to you, the third party, the vendor, the contractor. They want to ensure that this, quote, in confidentiality, the non-personal information is protected. They want to know that when information is exchanged, again, between them and yourself, that you have the proper controls in place to ensure that no one's authorizing this information, unintentional or, again, without proper authorization. And then last is privacy, and similar to security, privacy, it's very comprehensive. Again, as privacy continues to evolve, with the European Union privacy protection laws, the various states now, the California, New York, Massachusetts, a high level of sensitivity now revolves around privacy. What also is concerning to your clients is if you had a breach and this personal information goes out into the market, the black web, many different channels, in all likelihood, they will be brought into the litigation. There will be a practice of going to your clients and they will request the client demonstrate through, proper due diligence and accepted practices that they did proper due diligence on you to ensure that your practices would provide them a level of assurance that this personal information was, being properly secured. So again, a lot of this, the SOC 1 and SOC 2 and the additional 2 SOCs, they are actually driven off customer and client, your client's concern about the liability that may come back to them in the event of, some type of breach, disruption, theft of information. The other thing too is, they're concerned about their proprietary information, ensuring that, if they have to hand it to, again, a partnering contractor, that they're not at risk for theft, much like what Jeff stated about the F-35 and the intel that in several different, manners ended up in the hands of China. So again, your client's looking for that assurance to do business with you, that their information, their data, their financial, transactions are properly secure and protected. So to expand upon the SOC 2, the SOC 2 is, we just discussed about the 5 principles. The SOC 2 can have an expanded scope to it. So just jumping back here, if you look at the security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy, of information and systems, there are many other components and or demands, requirements on your clients when it, with regards to security. So in this case, you can do a SOC 2 and add to it other types of assurance services to further, demonstrate to your clients and or possibly obligations you have when bidding contracts to the, whether it's governmental bodies or, a private company requiring bids. They may request, not only do we want to see a SOC 2, we want you to demonstrate you're in compliance and, aligned with certain other standards, be it ISO, NIST, HIPAA, which is huge, certainly in the healthcare industry. HITRUST, again, a service offering. It is an assurance service, many times paired with the SOC 2. So again, it's what the market demands in order to gain comfort to do work with your company. And in this case, a SOC 2 may be requested by their auditors, but certain clients downstream say, we want a HITRUST report from you. Well, a lot of the various controls that would be tested overlap in these spaces. So you can combine them and do a SOC 2 plus, again, the HITRUST. Just knowing that today's seminar, was focused on the front end, specifically the CMMC. If you had a SOC 2 being performed and you were concerned with certain controls are going to fall within the scope of CMMC, you could capture those controls, align them to the SOC 2, and where those certain controls aren't currently covered in the SOC 2, they could be added to the SOC 2. In that case, you would have a SOC 2 plus, identified CMMC controls you'd like tested. Again, market-driven SOC for cybersecurity. So as cybersecurity has become risk number one in the minds of most, the AICPA, working, with a lot of different groups, developed a SOC for cybersecurity framework in order to perform a test work on the cybersecurity framework you have in place, the controls and such. And the SOC for cybersecurity, I'm going to say, is not as definitive or in a prescribed approach like a SOC 2 and its principles, but certainly the SOC for cybersecurity leverages off a lot of familiar other authoritative materials like the NIST 853, ISO 27001, and several others. Basically, it's what are you pulling from based on the design of your infrastructure to address cybersecurity and demonstrate that you are applying leading practices and controls to ensure that you're preventing breaches and or if a breach occurs, it's quickly detected. So again, SOC for cybersecurities now in a test type reporting service offered by CPA firm, and I should have met PFRM Solutions is a CPA firm, and the market's now more and more demanding SOC for cybersecurity reporting. The last one on this list, SOC for supply chain. Again, everything we've spoke about today touches on supply chain, and with that, the ICPA, again, this is a service offering of CPA firms pulled together experts on supply chain risk management, controls, logistics, and this, working group came up with a SOC for supply chain. Now, a lot of what's in the SOC for supply chain can be captured in areas of the SOC 2 with the 5 principles, but now it flows downstream. It's saying to you, the vendor, contractor, third-party provider of services, what do you do to test those underneath you, the subcontractors you're doing business with, to assure yourself that based on, I'm going to say, the level of sensitive information that is exchanged between you and your subcontractors is properly secure, protected, validated. So, we get the privacy, confidentiality, and, all those other matters come into play. This will be an ever-growing type of a test service that's going to be demanded by clients in the market, the general market, as will cybersecurity. For a number of years, there was SOC 1 and SOC 2. Very few companies in the market were requesting SOC 2. When the Target and all the various other breaches hit, it was kind of like a tsunami of cyber breaches. The demand for SOC 2 then became red hot, and it's continued to be red hot. And I expect the same for the SOC for cybersecurity and SOC for supply chain management. So as you consider these, again, it's back to that, what level of assurance is being sought by your clients? And again, in the open market, SOC is a high demand type report for your clients and or prospects. You're marketing to a prospect. The prospect will say, how could I be comfortable doing business with you from a security, cybersecurity, financial reporting standpoint, that I know that information I receive is accurate and information I provide is secure. And this is what's driving a lot of that market, the SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 2 Plus, SOC for cybersecurity, and SOC for supply chain management. So with that said, that's my primary, focus for my side of the presentation. Certainly, if any of these areas are of interest to you and or you haven't been acquainted to them previously, and this spikes an interest in further exploring the specifics of these SOC reports, please, our information's at the back of the slide deck. Send me an email, give me a phone call, and I certainly would welcome exploring any of these types of reports and or supply chain risk management assessment, enterprise risk management, the SOC. For those of you that may be Sarbanes-Oxley, public company traded, certainly open to receive a call, email from you, and explore what your needs might be. So with that, we will be moving to questions and answers. Angelique, did you receive any questions?
I did. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Don, for that. So welcome to the question and answer portion of our presentation. So I did receive a few questions, and I'll start off with the first one that I received. Is CMMC replacing ISO 27001? After CMMC is rolled out, is there even a need for these legacy certs? So there's a common misconception that an organization must choose between, maybe some of the NIST standards, such as that are in the CMMC and ISO, and that one is better than the other. In fact, they can both be used in an organization, and many have synergies. There's CMMC is based upon 5 or 6 different areas, such as your 27,000 different NIST standards and different DIB standards or whatnot, and it's rolled into the CMMC. Both are really useful for data security and any sort of risk assessment and security programs. And your CMMC is going to be an absolute requirement. It's going to be like when you're applying to colleges, and if you got this SAT score or didn't, you're in the we'll look at you pile or automatic rejection pile. ISO, sometimes it is you need it, and sometimes it's based on a point system when you're responding, when you have an RFP and you get certain, when you're at the RFP stage, rather, you have to tally up all of your points for what certifications you have. And they offer different aspects. So like I said, the CMMC is more technical, but then your ISO is more focused on risk at the organizational level of all shapes and sizes. So I do not think that the ISO standards are going to be legacy certs. I think what's going to happen is organizations are going to still need the 9/2027, the CMI suite, so either development services or both, and then a level of CMMC. That's just going to be a new thing, a new requirement. Well, CMMC is a requirement, and the others just add additional points, which kind of is a requirement because it's kind of a no-go, no-go if you're even looked at.
Gigi, I want to add a few things in the statement. When you say that the 27,000 and CMMC, it is a point that CMMC incorporates ISO 27,000 controls, but they are not replacing each other, but they're complementing each other. But when you talk about CMMC, we use the ISO 27,000 controls to the extent they design. So CMMC is developed for DoD supply chain, whereas ISO 27,000 is a corporate data security, does not have to do with the CMMI or CMMC. That makes sense?
Okay. All right, thank you. And so the next question is, if you have 27,000 in place, is there an added value with SOC 2 or SOC for cybersecurity? I believe, Don, you would be the best person to answer that in regards to the SOC portion.
I would say absolutely. And again, that was Jag Coda asking the previous question who GMS sponsored this webinar. So thank you, Jag, again for the sponsorship. Similarly to the conversation just on the prior question, they complement one another. I think the one thing you find out with the SOC or the SOC 2, it's more client focused in areas that may not be directly covered by 27,000. And, it can be tailored to addressing the specific needs and expectations of your clients. So if you were to just hand an ISO audit report over to your client, many of them, it will mean very little, but the manner in which a SOC 2 is performed, much more defined to the client, and I'm just to say simply digestible by the client, so that they can get a true understanding of your environment and their desire to do business with you and or continue to do business with you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Don. Any other questions before we close for today's event? And Don, let's go to our next slide. So if anyone has any additional questions that maybe they're thinking about after this presentation, we have our contact information here on the next slide. And you can take a picture of this because you can get our contact information. You can call us, you can email us either on our personal emails or at customerservice@gmsaudit.com. And please feel free to ask us any further questions about the CMMC program we heard earlier. I've captured all of the questions that were asked, so if any of your questions were unanswered, please expect a response from me, myself, or Jag in the next few days with the response. Okay, so we didn't forget about you. We were just short on time, and then Jeff had to head out. So all of those questions I've captured, and we will respond to them.
Okay, and also this is the contact information for PFRM Solutions. And again, same as Angeli, certainly forward me any questions or call me with any questions or any services they may have spiked in interest, please give me a call and we'll explore it.
Thank you, Don and Anjali. This was a great, great presentation.
Thank you, Vaughn.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today's presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day. Take
You all
care.
do the same.